on, Vikings fans? Welcome to the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, I wanted to actually dive in a little more to the Brian Flores Tua controversy, as I actually think this is great news for the Minnesota Vikings, and it may keep Brian Flores in Minnesota for a lot longer than us fans expected. Then also on the second half of today's show, I just want to go over some cut candidates and give you guys my thoughts on the final 53-man roster, what's going to happen with Cine. Could they trade him? And also, could they trade a guy like Brian Asamoah and Patrick Jones, as those two have been on the trade block as of lately? But before we dive into that, guys, we're actually closing in on 28,000 subscribers here on the channel. My goal before the offseason started was to hit 28K for Adrian Peterson, and we're just about 100 subscribers away. So if you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button and help me out and help me reach 28K for Adrian Peterson before week 1 versus the New York Giants. So I want to give you guys my thoughts on, the Brian Flores Tua controversy, and not specifically about, what Tua said or what Brian Flores said, but why this could potentially be great news for the Minnesota Vikings. And I think we got to start off first is I think this is going to be a motivated Brian Flores heading into the season. Now, obviously, last year, he probably expected to get some head coach interviews this past cycle, and he never got any. And I think a lot of that was other owners, other teams probably a little scared of what happened in Miami and not wanting to bring him in the organization and have it be a disaster, similar to a guy like Josh McDaniels, where he had a chance to be a head coach. It was a disaster, and then the Raiders ended up bringing him back, and then it was even more of a disaster. So I think teams are looking at that example and saying, do we really want that in our organization? And, not only is he going to be ticked off because he's going to want to prove himself, he's going to want to prove that he can, man a top 10 defense in the NFL, but also this will most likely keep Brian Flores in Minneapolis for at least the next 2 to 3 years, I would imagine. Now, even if the Vikings go out there and let's just say they blow my expectations out of the water for that side of the football, and they have top 5 in every statistical category, and they're one of the best defenses in the league, I still think after what Tua came out and said, I still think he's going to stay in Minneapolis. I think it could be very similar to, obviously Ben Johnson with the Lions. He's going to go get a head coaching job in the near future, and he more chose to stay in Detroit because he wants to win a Super Bowl there. He wants to compete, and he's going to wait for the right job opportunity. I can see the same thing with Flores. I don't think he's going to take let's just say a Tennessee Titans job or, a Carolina Panthers job where there's no stability in that organization. I don't think Flores is going to lean there. So I really do believe the great news for the Vikings is that Flores is probably going to stay in Minneapolis as the D coordinator for at least 2, 3, or maybe 4 more years. And, it kind of connects this back to the defense. And I think the Vikings defense might be the most underrated group in the NFL heading into this season. Now, we take it back 2 years ago when the Vikings lost in the wild card round to the New York Giants. Ed Donatello's defense got absolutely shredded, and it's one of the worst defenses in NFL history on a 13-win team. And then you saw the improvement this past year. I mean, especially you go back to what we were saying about that group during the Raiders game when they shut them out. The Vikings had a 3-0 win. Ivan Pace hit a backflip after his game-sealing interception. And, we were talking about that defense as being one of the better groups in the NFL. Obviously, when Byron Murphy got hurt, injuries started to trickle in, they definitely took a step back in the second half of the year. But you look at this group heading into the season, you got 2 good corners, in my opinion. They're not great, but they're good and they're serviceable in Gilmore and Murphy. This is the first time in a while where I felt comfortable with that cornerback group. And then the main position group that I think is going to be fantastic for this defense is the edge department. Now, we haven't seen Jonathan Grenard play at all during the preseason, haven't really heard too much about him out of training camp, but I'm expecting him to have a big year as he had 12.5 sacks last season in his breakout year with the Texans in only 14 games. And then you bring in the Swiss Army knife in Andrew Van Ginkel, who was a perfect scheme fit for what Brian Flores likes to do. As we know, his MO, you line 7 to 8 guys up on the line of scrimmage, and he could either send 3 or he could send all 8. And when you have a versatile player like Van Ginkel, he can play in perfectly with that system. And then we saw Dallas Turner. I mean, in very limited reps in the preseason, he went toe-to-toe with Thayer Munford, one of the best left tackles in the league for the Las Vegas Raiders, and he beat him on 3 straight snaps, and he got 2 pressures, and he got a sack, and he looks the part. Again, every single time I watch him play, he gives me like this Von Miller, Brian Burns guy where he's not going to be that traditional 4-3 edge where he can set the edge on any given run play. But he's more of the build where it's like he is so fast, so athletic. He's got great dip on his pass rushing moves, and I think he's going to be fantastic right away in the NFL. You also got to think about it. Dallas Turner, he was the second youngest guy drafted in this year's first round besides J.J. McCarthy. So he's only 21 years old as well. And then you just kick it to the linebacker group. Like Ivan Pace, Blake Cashman. I'm excited to watch those guys play. That's a solid group as well. Then we obviously know the safety department is one of the best in the NFL with that three-headed monster in Metellus, Smith, and Bynum. I think the biggest question mark I would have with the Vikings defense would be probably the interior of the defensive line. Like, you got okay players in Harrison Phillips. You're hoping Jerry Tillery can somewhat live up to that first-round hype he had coming out of college. But, overall, I think it's undisputed the Vikings defense is going to be top 10 this year. And I think it's just going to come down to a couple of these young guys developing. If Flores can get the most out of them, if they're going to be top 5. And I can connect this back with the entire Vikings team. I think they're going underrated. I think they're going under talked about because you've got blue chippers at important positions on offense. You've got one of the best left tackles in the league in Darisaw. We obviously know what Jefferson's about. You got Hawkinson hopefully returning by week 7. Aaron Jones is one of the most underrated running backs in the league, in my opinion. And, it's so funny. You go look at, the Packers' surgence at the second half of the year last year. Everybody chalks that up to Jordan Love. And for the right reason. He played great. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the second half of the year last year. But Aaron Jones ran for over 100 yards in each of their last 5 games. He was key against the Cowboys. He was great, actually, against the San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round. And I think people are forgetting how truly special he is in the backfield. And if I had to chalk up the Vikings, mishaps in terms of running the football over the last couple of years, I chalk that up to the offensive line. I chalk that up to the running back position, not the offensive line, as PFF has always graded them out very well over the past couple of years. But you had a cooked Dalvin Cook in the first year under O'Connell, and then Alexander Mattison was one of the worst running backs in the league last year. You add in a premium back in Jones, compare that with the offensive line, and if this offense is top 15, pair that up with a potential top 10, top 5 defense, the Vikings are going to be a tough out any given week. And the thing that drives me crazy when I hear about this football team is Colin Cowherd and all these media heads that get out and say the Vikings are going to be the best 4th-place team in NFL history. I think that's giving them credit, obviously, because they're a good organization. They got good football players. But to just say automatically the Bears are going to have a better record than them, I think it's kind of ludicrous. Or even other teams in the conference. I could see the Vikings having a better record than the Cowboys with all the noise they have over there. And you got teams like the Seahawks being rated higher than them. You got teams like, the Saints, Buccaneers. I think the Falcons are going to be a good team. But would it shock me if the Vikings have a better record than them? Absolutely not. So you guys let me know down in the comments section. Over, under, 6.5 wins for the Vikings. Give me an O for over or give me a U for under down below in the comments section. Now, going to be diving into some cut candidates here in a second to just talk about the Vikings 53-man roster. But first off, got to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app, use promo code CLNS, and we'll match your first deposit up to $100. And it's simple to play. All you do, you choose more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you guys can start watching the winnings roll in today. So give them a chance. Download the Prize Picks app. If you plug in that promo code before your first deposit, we will match whatever it is up to $100. All right, so let's dive into some cut candidates and just talk about the Vikings' potential 53-man roster. As I don't really believe the Vikings have a whole lot of tough decisions to make, as I think a lot of this is already probably scripted out. They probably already know the 53 they're going to take, but I do want to talk about a couple big names. Jaron Hall, I think he's going to make the final 53. I think the Vikings are going to keep 3 quarterbacks. I don't think they're going to risk him, having to clear waivers and get back on the practice squad. I think they're just going to keep him on the roster. And then a guy that I do think is going to get cut at the tight end position is Robert Tonyan. I actually do believe the Vikes are going to choose to keep N'Keal Harry over him, as Tonyan is dealing with injuries. Judd Zuglad did mention the other day that he could potentially have to retire due to his body. Apparently, it's not holding up well. So I could see Tonyan getting cut. But let's talk about the wide receiver group here. So, Jefferson, Addison, Naylor, and Tristan Jackson are all locks. Those are going to be the 4 that make it, no doubt about it. Now, it's going to come down, do they keep 5? Do they keep 6 wide receivers? If they keep 5, I'm assuming it's going to be Brandon Powell gets the nod, and then Jayshon Jones, Trent Sherfield, hopefully they get to the practice squad, or they'll just be waived. So I think they're going to keep 5 there, that being Jefferson, Addison, Naylor, Jackson, and Powell. And then another big group, the edge department. I think you got the big 3, I'll call it, in Turner, Van Ginkel, and Grenard. And I think they're going to keep Jihad Ward. They've already came out and said that they are a big fan of them. Flores loves him, and especially his versatility. But then I think they're going to go with Andre Carter, actually, over a guy like Patrick Jones. So remember, turn on those notifications, because I could see a Patrick Jones trade going down before cutdown day on Tuesday. But I do think they're going to try to get Bo Richter back to the practice squad. Hopefully he clears waivers. I'm assuming he will. Then I think they are going to put Gabe Murphy on IR. He was dealing with injuries this entire training camp process, the entire preseason, so he hasn't been able to get out there and play. So I think they're just going to put him on IR. Now the safety spot, I think Lewis Cine is getting cut. I actually don't think he's going to get traded. He was getting third-team reps with the defense yesterday in their last preseason game, and I think that was very telling on how the Vikings view him. So I'm assuming they're going to keep, obviously Harrison, Metellus, Bynum. They're going to lean Theo Jackson over Cine, and then, it depends if they're going to keep 5 safeties. They kept 6 last year, as Brian Flores runs 3 safety sets on 94% of defensive possessions or defensive plays. So I'm assuming Cine's going to get cut. Maybe they could swing a 6th, 7th round pick for him. But overall, that draft class for Kwesi is looking terrible. I mean, you took Cine in the first round, you took Booth in the second, and then Ed Ingram, who is Mr. Inconsistent for the Vikings offensive line at right guard. I mean, the first 3 picks are terrible, and especially a guy like Brian Asamoah in the 4th round, he could, or the second, 3rd round pick that year, he's probably going to get cut or traded before Tuesday. Like, the Vikings are going to have one player from that draft class, and that being Ed Ingram, who really hasn't given us much throughout his NFL career. But I do also expect Duke Shelley, Bobby McCain to get cut from this team as well. But I just think it's pretty obvious what the Vikes are going to do here with this final 53-man roster. But again, you guys let me know down in the comment section about Lewis Cine. Would you keep him or would you cut him? Give me a C for cut or give me a K for keep. I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching today's show. We'll have a video coming out tomorrow, probably breaking down more about this 53-man roster. So make sure you are subscribed. Turn on those notifications. Don't miss a thing around your favorite football team. We'll see you guys next time. SKOL Vikes.